Allergies are annoying, but they can also be lethal. Many people are allergic to various foods. Rarely, people are allergic to surprising things like light, water, or even proteins in their own organs. Yes, you can even be attacked by your own flesh and blood.
All you have to be is quiet and willing to do it. And son, I am willing to do it. And I've got quiet shoes. Good night, son. Sleep well.
I'm still getting upset people talking about vitamin C and how vital it supposedly is to supplement it. There's some supplements with very encouraging results that I don't take because I am not sure if the mechanisms will be helpful or harmful in the long run. AFA for stem cell release would be fantastic, but only if I was sure there's no drawback. Same for fisetin, which kills off senescent cells. What if AFA stem cell release was releasing the stem cells but not regenerating them? That's what chronically elevated cortisol does, and that's what causes hair loss and hair graying from cortisol. Fortunately, when you fast, you're protected from this by the release of growth hormone, which will regenerate the stem cell pools. But when it's high all the time, you're going to rapidly age. I have the same worries about fisetin. Sure, it gets rid of senescent cells, but if it's merely turning the off switch on telomeres, then that could lead to cancer. And I'd also worry about stem cell depletion from bystander damage. That's why I would like to see animal studies that give the animal these supplements for their whole life and see what it does for their lifespan. Until then, I just have too many questions to take them, considering their mechanism of action and the possible pitfalls. Alpha-ketoglutarate increases lifespan in mice by about 10%, but significantly it tends to keep the mice young and healthy looking. They have much thicker hair and much less gray hair. Taurine is also shown to extend life in animal studies. So is Glynac, the combination of NAC and glycine. Pretty much all the supplements I recommend have been shown to extend life in animal studies, or they're shown in feeding studies to be critical to development, such as choline. The difference in development between those deficient in choline and those with optimal levels is simply staggering, and over 90% of people today are deficient. Unfortunately, vitamin C or ascorbic acid has never been shown to extend life in animal studies. In fact, it's shown to decrease lifespan in animal studies by around 20 to 25%. Interestingly, it also had the opposite effect on oxidation status you might expect, causing the animals to down-regulate the antioxidant abilities of their cells, which is exactly the opposite reason that you would take vitamin C. While it's true that the body uses ascorbic acid for many things, that alone does not mean supplementing it is a good idea. It's really DHAA that the human body can use, or dehydroascorbic acid, and it's plentiful in fresh meat. The levels are not known because it has not been tested, but DHAA will be in the mitochondria of animal products, just like ascorbic acid is in the mitochondria of plant cells. Well, we know there's many more times the mitochondria in muscle meat than there is in an apple, and there's even more in organ meat, a whole lot more. So it stands to reason there's tons of DHAA in meat and even more in organ meat. So if you're eating meat, you're not going to be deficient in vitamin C. You're probably getting much, much more. You're just avoiding the harmful form, which is ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid actually interferes with the absorption of copper, which makes it hard for the body to create ceruloplasmin. This is a vitally important molecule in the body, much more important than ascorbic acid is, and it plays a role in neutralizing free radicals in the body.
Do you know who I am?
No, I can't say that I do.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
While ascorbic acid blocks copper from being absorbed, DHEA does not. This may tempt you to go and supplement large amounts of copper, but this is a bad idea as it will drive down your other electrolytes, and copper can also concentrate in your liver and cause problems as well. It is much better to get them all in the proper balanced ratios in the first place from animal product. In plants, copper is relatively heavy compared to other electrolytes, especially in many nuts, and while most of the minerals in plants are locked up in oxalate crystals and unusable, copper will be proportionally higher, and this will throw your balance out of whack. Avoiding ascorbic acid in the first place and taking DHEA instead is going to help you avoid these issues. Ascorbic acid is very difficult to absorb and is easily outcompeted for transport by glucose because they both use the GLUT4 transporter. However, so does DHEA, and DHEA also outcompetes not only ascorbic acid, but also glucose itself, and it does so by a factor of 100 times. This is clearly what the body is designed to use, and not ascorbic acid, which the body simply does not want. Blocking the creation of ceruloplasmin is one way that ascorbic acid causes problems, but there may be others as well. Ascorbic acid is very reactive, which means it can be just as damaging as the ROS, which people use it to combat. It could also just be that the cells are shutting down their antioxidant capacity because ascorbic acid is a signaling molecule, and the less you have, the more the cell tries to turn this up. Either way, ascorbic acid just does not pan out as a great health supplement. It shows promising mechanisms, but it's been tried over and over, and it's failed over and over. So while lifespan extension in animals is definitely a good indicator, can we actually live longer taking these supplements that extend their lifespan? Many of them extend lifespan by 10%, 20%, or even more. In human terms, 1% would be living almost a year longer, and adding all of these up would be quite significant. Unfortunately, not everything that works in animals pans out in humans, but things that occur on a cellular level do tend to pan out. It's important to realize the benefits tend to be dramatically less though. Typically about 1/10 as much change is seen because rodents have a much faster metabolism and things affect them much more. So a mouse might get 50% more cancer from eating a certain diet, but for humans we typically get something like 5% more cancer. Of course, any amount more cancer probably means we shouldn't be doing that. While only a long-term trial on humans could say for sure, I would guess 20% of life extension in a mouse would give a 2% life extension in a human. 2 years or thereabouts is nothing to scoff at though, and importantly, these substances seem to do a lot to improve the health and youthfulness as well, especially with alpha-ketoglutarate. And if we take all of them, we could be getting as much as 10 years in lifespan in addition to our normal lifespan, which is really quite a lot. These studies that look at the whole life of an animal are the only way to truly judge whether a supplement is worthwhile or not, and for determining dosage. Sadly, these are seldom performed anymore, and often we just don't have enough information to do more than just speculate.
Hey, don't open that! It's an alien planet! Is there air? You don't know!
Seems okay.
While ascorbic acid might slightly, temporarily boost the immune system, it's going to do nothing compared to what fasting will do for it, or even what vitamin D can do for it. Fasting regenerates the white blood cells, and if they're not working properly, you can't fight off anything. Not to mention that it regenerates the thymus, which is critical for the immune system. And remember, anything ascorbic acid can do, dehydroascorbic acid from meat can do better, and with far fewer side effects. Sorry for the long digression, but I meant to talk more about why I choose certain supplements in the last video, and somehow I just didn't get there. When the immune system comes across something it does not recognize, it makes antibodies against it to destroy it. The issue arises when this antibody also has effects on your own organs, because the immune cells actually mistake your organs for this pathogen or this invader. When you have a food allergy, this is typically proteins from the food which the body sees as intruders. The thing is, the proteins are not supposed to make it into the bloodstream in the first place. The gut lining is supposed to block them out, but as we age, these junctions loosen, and many pathogenic gut bacteria can weaken these junctions. About half of the white blood cells in your body spend all their time fighting off these intruders, and as we age, this ratio gets worse and worse. In fact, this is the root cause of the loss of NAD+ inside our cells. The macrophages in our body waste huge amounts of NAD+ fighting off these pathogens, especially the ones which produce the very damaging lipopolysaccharides, which cause many problems in the body.
So this leads us to an interim model, which is that senescence and the SUSP not only induces macrophage proliferations, macrophage senescence. We've shown that it also induces CD38 expression. Both the induction of CD38 expression in macrophages and in non-macrophages cells, as we have recently published, we believe contribute to the tissue-associated decrease in NAD and the accompanying metabolic dysfunction and sirtuin dysfunction. So the next question that I will spend a few minutes on, which is really key here, is our effort to try to understand what activates CD38 expression in aging macrophages. The PAMs are pathogen-associated molecular pattern. So these are molecules that are typically released by pathogens, whereas the DAMs are damage-associated molecular pattern signatures. These are molecules that are typically released by cells that are stressed or injured. And macrophages are able to recognize those, to activate a specific signaling pathways, and to leading to the release of cytokines, chemokines, immune cell recruitments, inflammation, and tissue repair eventually. So our first question was, what are any of these PAMs and DAMs able to activate CD38 expression in macrophages? And so the experiment was done by isolating primary macrophages from mice, growing them in culture, and subjecting them to treatment with a variety of these PAMs and DAMs. And what emerged is actually a pretty striking picture. We were expecting the DAMs to do it, but we were surprised to find that these macrophages actually responded primarily to pathogen-associated molecular signatures. In particular, one of them drew our attention. This is LPS. This is lipopolysaccharide. This particular molecule, which is released by gram-negative bacteria, is actually one of the main triggers for the differentiation of macrophages into a unique form in the so-called M1 macrophages.
Lipopolysaccharides are part of the cell membrane of many gram-negative bacteria, and these can damage the liver, the gut itself, and as shown in the clip, it is the main source of NAD+ depletion as we age, which shuts off our ability to activate sirtuins, which are used to repair DNA damage within cells, and thus we're unable to repair the damage of aging. If enough LPS enters the bloodstream from the gut, it leads to septic shock and ultimately death. These gut bacteria are ultimately what destroys your immune system and kills you in extreme old age. As your stem cell pool weakens, it becomes harder and harder to fight these invaders off, and it weakens your immune system and your anti-aging repair mechanisms until they're just totally ineffective. Even when we're young, these cause a great deal of damage, including contributing to autoimmune disease. Wheat, fructose, and other sugars make LPS-producing bacteria go crazy and overwhelm the gut microbiome. They also damage the junctions of the gut itself, and as they become weaker, things that are not supposed to enter the bloodstream do. Protein is supposed to be broken down into tiny pieces, and then only these tiny pieces which the body wants to take in are absorbed. When the gut is leaky, larger and larger pieces of proteins can make it through the gut, leading to the creation of antibodies that cause autoimmune attacks on the body itself. And if things get really bad, then actual bacteria can make it through, and that's really bad news. While autoimmune diseases have vastly different symptoms, the cause and mechanism is largely the same. Thankfully, this means the solution to all of them is also the same. First off, restricting the diet will temporarily stop many autoimmune diseases, because if you don't eat the proteins in question, which your body's programmed to attack, then you're not going to get the negative effects. Obviously, when you fast, this will also stop the proteins from entering the bloodstream because you're just not eating them. This can give the body a much needed break, and it has other effects that are going to dramatically help with autoimmune disease, but you do have to eat sometime. Thankfully, people are very seldom allergic to beef, and a carnivore diet can have amazing results.
Yeah, it is a bit late, isn't it? You know, when somebody starts having deranged HbA1c and deranged fasting blood sugar, they've likely had elevated insulin levels for 10 to 15 years. And that's been causing a lot of that's been causing a lot of problems. That elevated insulin causes, just plays merry hell with your system, your metabolism, and most of your other hormones. And so you're meeting a demand, so your body's compensating for hyperglycemia, but it's taking more and more insulin to do it and to get the job done, and eventually you just sort of wear yourself out and burn yourself out, and then you can't compensate for hyperglycemia, and then we start calling, oh, now you're pre-diabetic. Now you were pre-diabetic 15 years ago. Now you've got a problem. And so, and the main way to do that is not give more insulin, which is now compounding the problem, because now you're raising the insulin even higher, and causing more problems. You're getting the blood sugar under control, and that's good, because high blood sugar is directly damaging to your body. But like you say, it's not addressing the root cause. It's a band-aid. It's a bad band-aid, because the insulin itself causes its own problems. And the same thing with the Hashimoto's. That's a very underdiagnosed condition. I've seen so many people with Hashimoto's. So many people that just come in, they just have, a bit of problems with weight gain, can't really, shift their weight, and they are just a little low energy, just feeling off. You'd be surprised how many of those people end up having, markedly elevated Hashimoto's antibodies, and their thyroid function is a little skewed, but it's something that like a normal doctor would trigger them to say, like, it's within the normal, quote unquote, normal range for the reference range for the labs, but those are wildly off because most people are sick and metabolically unhealthy. So those reference ranges are looking at people who are sick and metabolically unhealthy. And so we look at other ones, they say, okay, actually for you're in their range, but you're outside of our range. And why is that? You check their antibodies and 600 or something like that. Say, okay, so that's what this is. And you catch that at a time when it's just the insulin's up, the fasting insulin's up, but you're not pre-diabetic yet. And so you actually have, you can salvage more when you do that. You catch things early, and they don't have to suffer for 15 years before they get a diagnosis when they're just absolutely, destroyed. And say, oh, yeah, you have Hashimoto's. Now we can treat you. Well, what about 15 years ago when they started feeling like crap and came to you and you were like, nope, everything's within the right range. So
you don't let anyone tell you how you feel. You know how you feel. If you're not okay, you're not okay.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's the most important thing. It's something that's drilled into people as their doctors coming up, is that you treat patients, you don't treat lab tests. Okay, like, oh, the lab test is normal, but they're sick. Okay, so figure out what the hell's going on.
The only problem with this is that it only lasts as long as your diet is 100% strict, and symptoms can return at any time if you have a dietary slip-up. That begs the question what we can do to lessen the symptoms or even stop them completely on a permanent basis. Since the main root cause is a leaky gut, if we can plug these junctions back up, we can dramatically lessen the symptom. If these foreign proteins can't get into the bloodstream, then there's going to be no autoimmune reaction to begin with. Even serious lethal allergies like peanut allergies have been cured using this approach. Though obviously in these extreme cases, you should only try to reintroduce an allergen under strict medical supervision. Probiotics can help a great deal even if they do not colonize the gut. This is because probiotics tend to kill off the pathogenic gut bacteria that don't belong there, and they do this by producing things like acetic acid and biocides which kill them off, but which they themselves are immune to. This is how probiotics like L-reuteri and Bulgari can actually help kill off H. pylori in the stomach. H. pylori can only live in a less acidic environment, and it has evolved to kill off your acid-secreting cells in the stomach to make a safe environment for itself. This not only allows it and other pathogenic bacteria to overgrow the body, but it is one of the main problems that lead to allergies in the first place. When stomach acid is low, the body can't properly break up proteins, and the large proteins your body attacks when it sees in the bloodstream will be present in the gut in large numbers, which makes it more likely for them to slip through into the bloodstream. A high pH, low oxygen environment is where most pathogenic bacteria thrive. Botulism is a good example, but many less obvious pathogenic bacteria will increase their numbers in these conditions, including the ones that are known for producing the dreaded lipopolysaccharides within the body. Many pathogenic gut bacteria and fungi will also grow wild when exposed to foods like sugar and wheat. That's because their main strategy is to reproduce very quickly using these simple nutrients, and thereby outcompete the more complex types of bacteria. This leads to SIBO and constipation, which people often have without realizing. Many times people go low carb or do some fasting, and they complain about having to go to the bathroom constantly or having watery stools, especially right after they break a fast. This is because you're killing off these bacteria which are holding on to the waste and clogging up your system. When you stop feeding them, eventually this problem goes away and you won't have to worry about rushing to the bathroom the minute you eat. You also won't have a constantly bloated gut even though your body fat percentage is not that high. And that's a problem that I had for a long time, and it'll come back if I start doing certain bad things such as taking artificial sweeteners. As you can see, if you can get your gut and your stomach acid into good shape, you can really improve your symptoms for autoimmune disease. You'll also be a lot healthier, and you'll probably have a more optimistic outlook on life.
Tell me, what's the difference between an optimist and a pessimist?
An optimist says the drink is half full. A pessimist says the drink is half full, but I might have bowel cancer.
This is just the basics though. You will get relief and might be able to eat the problem foods again, but you probably won't completely get rid of the problem. That's where fasting comes in. When you fast, this has a great effect on your gut bacteria. It kills off the bad bacteria, but many of the positive ones actually can feed on these bad bacteria as they die. And if you don't give these bad bacteria the fuel and the environment they thrive in, they're not going to come back afterwards. When you manage to raise your gut acidity and your stomach acidity, and you stop binging on carbs, especially refined carbs like sugar and wheat, these bacteria will lose hold over your body over time. While probiotic supplements typically don't colonize the body, they also help to make the environment one that positive gut bacteria will thrive in. These bacteria are all over the place, so as you lower your carbs and fast, eventually positive changes are going to occur. Fasting does a lot more than that though. Fasting also releases stem cells when you fast for 72 hours or more, and this will help regenerate your organs. This includes your thyroid and your pancreas. It's been shown that lowering blood sugar alone is enough to help regain beta cells in the pancreas, and therefore fasting should do this even more quickly than diet can, and this will increase your ability to create insulin even more. Many type 1 diabetics have experienced a lessened need for insulin after fasting, but this should only be done under strict doctor supervision. The main issue with fasting for type 1 diabetics is ketoacidosis, which is the generation of extremely high ketone levels that can occur over time with extended fasting and cause a great deal of damage. This only happens in type 1 diabetics, but it can become life-threatening, so a blood ketone meter is a wise purchase. If ketones reach the 8 to 10 range, it's probably time for type 1 diabetics to end the fast, and they can always start another fast in a few days. I don't really encourage people to do this, and if they do, they should do so under strict medical supervision. I only point this out because it could be of use in other autoimmune conditions as well. I do wonder if type 1 diabetes can be overcome through fasting, since it can increase beta cells in the body to at least some degree, and it does release stem cells which can also repair the pancreas. But if so, I assume it would take quite a few 72 to 96 hour fasts, and so far we don't have incontrovertible proof that this is possible. Fasting also helps in a lot of other ways. Treg cells are vital when autoimmune disease comes into play. These special cells are created in the thymus only when stem cells are released, and only a tiny percentage of the stem cells that enter the thymus will successfully become Treg cells, and the rest are killed off. Whenever you have an immune reaction, it can damage the body itself, but Treg cells are an ingenious way the body can modulate these reactions where it's appropriate. It's important to realize that immunomodulation does not mean decreasing the effect, but channeling it so it does not cause damage to the body, so making sure that it still kills pathogens, but it won't attack cells in your gut lining, for example. Many people, including some doctors, think in terms of lessening immune reactions. However, we don't want to impede the immune system. We want the immune system to work in an appropriate manner, and that's where these special cells come in. Unfortunately, people typically stop making these cells as they get older. Most of them are made when we're children, and without a release of stem cells caused by something like an extended fast, your body simply won't make more of them. These Treg cells can also only imprint on a specific reaction or antibody. So if the immune system is attacking your gut and causing large amounts of inflammation, it will deploy some Treg cells to the gut if it can. This will stop the reaction from attacking the gut, but the reaction can still do what it's supposed to do in the bloodstream and other organs. The problem is, once they have all been deployed, there's simply nothing the immune system can do to stop these inappropriate reactions that cause the cells in your body to attack other cells in the body. This is why cytokine storms are very common in the elderly when they're exposed to certain unfamiliar pathogens. This often has disastrous results, such as requiring a ventilator. Not only does stem cell release from fasting create new Treg cells, but it also regenerates the thymus and other organs that tend to atrophy over time. The thymus is very sensitive to growth hormone, but as we age, our growth hormone levels drop to almost nothing by age 36. Thankfully, fasting will release growth hormone, which is shown to regenerate the thymus, and this has amazing positive benefits for the immune system. Without the thymus, we can't make any T cells at all, and that leaves us highly vulnerable. This is one of the main causes of death in old age, because this leaves us open to cancer, autoimmune disease, and even the common sniffle. In short, if you do enough fasting, you will make new Treg cells, and this could give you significant relief to an autoimmune ailment, or even make it disappear for good. That's not all that fasting can do, though. The immune cells that know how to create antibodies are your B cells.
And I used to describe this as being the T cell and the B cell, the T cell coming from the thymus gland, the B cell coming in humans from mainly bone marrow. And there was this system very quickly of regulation where we found that both T cells and B cells, all those arrows are regulatory loops. By that I mean various small molecules were being made by both T cells and B cells that could actually turn off or turn on the activity. So you had a complex interactive system with helper and suppressor T cells and various helper and suppressor mechanisms involving the antibody producing B lymphocytes.
So we could actually start off with just maybe a few cells, maybe half a dozen cells, lymphocytes that actually recognize the antigen. And then because they're stimulated, as it were, by the antigen, we end up with untold billions of those.
When you have an immune reaction that generates antibodies, your body imprints large amounts of these B cells with instructions on how to create them. When you fast, many of these B cells will simply die, and this weakens future reactions. If a large amount of the trigger protein is detected, the body can ramp up B cell imprintation again. So this does not harm your ability to fight off pathogens you've been exposed to. It just means the more you fast, the less your body will overreact to benign proteins found in the bloodstream in tiny amounts. Finally, fasting and a low-carb diet also have an amazing effect on reducing inflammation. This is the big part of the problem with autoimmune disease, and it is also involved in all mental health issues. Fasting quickly and dramatically lowers insulin in the body, and if you maintain a healthy diet that does not spike insulin excessively, it will stay low once the fast is over. This leads the body to shed excess water, which at its most basic level is what inflammation is. Excess water inside of your cells.
And it can still work quite well at the kidney level. And one of the jobs of insulin at the kidney level is to actually hold on to sodium. So that's actually a much more important factor for increasing the sodium in your body and causing high blood pressure than is the amount of sodium that you consume. If you consume a modicum of sodium but have very high insulin levels, your body's going to try very hard to hold on to all of that sodium. You can, on the other hand, consume a whole lot of sodium but have very good low insulin levels, and any excess sodium that you consume will just come out in your urine.
Phototherapy can also help because it can help produce collagen in the body to heal the gut, and it can even release new stem cells.
Now the mechanisms, there's quite a few different mechanisms. The main mechanism revolves around the mitochondria. So the cytochrome C oxidase, which is unit 4 in the mitochondrial respiratory chain, is accepted as a chromophore for red and near infrared light, and the idea is that you get more oxygen consumption, more ATP, the mitochondrial membrane potential goes up. Other things happen, but one important thing is that the mitochondrial metabolism switches from glycolysis back towards oxidative phosphorylation, which is important because it has a few effects on the whole metabolism. You get a lot of signaling happens based on this mitochondrial activity. You get nitric oxide released, you get ATP and cyclic AMP, you get a brief burst of reactive oxygen species. These activate transcription factors, so June-Phos is AP1, I-kappa B allows NF-kappa B to go to the nucleus, and these transcription factors can trigger the expression of over 100 different genes, which is a long-lasting effect. So these proteins that are triggered by these transcription factors will last for hours, days, and even weeks. So a single exposure to light can have long-lasting effects. As I said, this switch of glycolysis to oxidative phosphorylation is important for two reasons. One is that stem cells are activated. Stem cells in their hypoxic niche carry out glycolysis, but when the mitochondria are activated, they need oxygen, so they have to get out of their niche when they can undergo proliferation and differentiation programs. The second effect of this glycolysis to OXPHOS switch is anti-inflammatory. So macrophages have an M1 phenotype and a pro-inflammatory carry out glycolysis. When OXPHOS is activated, they switch to the M2 anti-inflammatory phenotype. And if these happen to be microglia in the brain, they can undergo phagocytosis, for instance, disposing of amyloid plaque that clogs up the brain tail. But we did discover quite a few interesting things about how shining light on the head has beneficial effects. And we've summarized them in this diagram here. So there's a lot of different processes here, and there is positive evidence for all of them, actually.
Many amino acids like taurine and glycine will also help a great deal, not just with the gut, but also the immune system itself. Taurine has also been shown to cause stem cell release, which is vital for fixing autoimmune issues. Autoimmune disease and allergies can be extremely serious and are not to be taken lightly. Thankfully, it is recently shown that allergic reactions can be completely cured. Since autoimmune disease is essentially an allergic reaction, it is promising that in the future it will be shown that treatments like fasting, probiotics, taurine and glycine, phototherapy, and a low-carb diet can cure these as well over time. In the meantime, nothing stops us from using these methods to get as much relief as possible, because nothing is worse than being attacked by your own flesh and blood.
Oh, did I wake you, son? Jeez, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you up. Well, you just get a good night's sleep. I'm gonna go out and buy a lot of carpeting.